what's needed to allow you to go for it? What do you need to reimagine you? What do you need to reimagine your life? What assets can you bring with you and build on?
Welcome to Reimagining You, where we explore reinvention, leadership, and personal branding through the stories of those who are changing the game. Today, I'm joined by an incredible leader whose impact speaks for itself. CB Bowman is the founder of the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, ACEC. She hosted over 600 episodes of her own podcast, doing the work and leading the way long before others even caught on. You claim to be the expert now on courage. You've written 3 books and now you have a 4th one coming.
Finally, a colleague of mine said, okay, CB, it's time. It's time for people to know who you were. And by that time, ACEC had grown and had credibility. Courage comes in different forms. Courage is in the eye of the beholder.
What's your secret of networking? I'm dying to know.
I learned a long time ago that the best relationship you can build is based upon what you can do for the other person. Something else that's really important. You have to be ready to fairly evaluate the person that you're introducing and vice versa.
Welcome to Reimagining You, where we explore reinvention, leadership, and personal branding through the stories of those who are changing the game. Today, I'm joined by an incredible leader whose impact speaks for itself. She's the founder of the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, ACEC, the architect of MCEC certification, and a pioneer in the role of enterprise-wide business partner. I like that sentence. Her work has created standards, not just frameworks, and she's built a global network of executive coaches who hold her in high regard. Just a point of notification here. People do things for her because it's her who asked. She's a servant leader, a master delegator, and someone who's turned vision into real lasting impact. And if this is not enough, she hosted over 600 episodes of her own podcast, doing the work and leading the way long before others even caught on. It's a true honor to be here with her today, especially as I look ahead to joining her as an incoming president of ACEC in 2026. CB Bowman, welcome to Reimagining You.
Thank you, Elie. It's a pleasure to be here and to smile and learn from you.
I'm humbled for that. CB, while I'm doing a research, and this is something that you did not really share with me. Now, you claim to be the expert now on courage. You've written 3 books and now you have a 4th one coming. But I recall a story that I read somewhere in an interview where you were asked to speak on a stage in, I think, Spain, and I've asked you to speak about courage, not about leadership, not about coaching. And you said, I have no clue. So tell me more about this. How did you come up from no clue to writing books on courage?
It was called being in denial. All of my life, people have said to me that I'm very courageous, and I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Because to me, being courageous meant you jumped in a pool to save a dog when you didn't know how to swim. You ran into a burning building to save a child. And so it was always this grandiose definition of courage. And as I was writing my presentation, I realized that courage comes in different forms. Courage is in the eye of the beholder. So I need to re-examine this label people have given me and figure out why. And that's how it started.
That's nice. And you had the biggest courage, actually, which is starting from scratch a coaching organization, ACEC, where the actual coaching association space was crowded. There's a lot of organizations, big, medium, and small, joining hands, maybe recruiting members, coaches, to be part of their association. Yet you decided to go there and that took a lot of courage. So, how did this mission of setting up a new organization, an Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, ACEC, came
So
about?
it actually took more courage than people realize, because when I came up with the idea, I thought, gosh, I don't know where to start. Let me talk to somebody who's already done this, who is not, I didn't see the person as a competitor because they were in a different country. And so few people know this story. I called this person up and I said, I'd like to open an association for corporate executive coaches, and this is what I think, and this is what I believe. And she listened and she said, well, you'd be impinging on my space. And I said, well, but that's not true. You're not in the United States. And she said, well, I plan on expanding into the United States. And I said, okay. And she started to tell me everything that could go wrong, everything. I was so depressed by the time the call ended. And I thought, oh, scratch this idea. But at the end of the call, she said to me, I hope that I have been helpful. And somehow that courage came up, and I said to her, you know, if what you've just done to me under the guises of helping me, then the executive coaching field is in trouble. I said, because I am
Right.
so depressed as a result of talking to you.
Mm.
And she said, well, I'm so sorry. I thought I was being helpful. I said, helpfully negative.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
hung up, and I happened to look over on my bookshelf, and there was a copy of Blue Ocean Strategy. And I said, remember what you read, calm down, and go for the gold. And so, how that all started, the original idea was because there was a colleague of mine who was chief human resource officer for a Fortune 500 company. And he called me one day and he was all excited and he said, I'm going for my license in this accreditation in this world of coaching and I'm so excited. And I said, time out. Aren't you certified by SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Executives? Management? And he said, yeah. And I said, you're globally certified? And he said, yes, because that's the top of the certification. I said, and aren't you an attorney? And he said, yes. And I said, so you're doing this, what, to put another plaque on your wall? What gives? And he said, no, I mean, I want to have a better understanding of the people I'm hiring. And I said, okay, well, go for it. And about
Mhm.
6 months later, he called me up and he was so excited. And he said, CB, I'm so excited about what I've learned. And I'm like, and he's going on and on. And I said, okay, tell me the most important thing that you've learned. And he said, well, I've learned there's a difference between coaching and consulting. And I said, that's it? He said, yeah. And he said, I said, that's the thing that's most exciting to you. And he said, CB, are you being sarcastic with me? And I said, oh, me? Never. And he said, I don't know, but I'm guessing that I should be excited about other things I'm learning. And I said, no, no, I asked you a clear question. Keep going,
Mhm.
go for it. And he said, okay. Then, when the program was about finished, he called me up and he said, CB, I have a problem. And I said, what is it, darling? And he said, well, I found out in order to get my certification, I have to be shadowed by somebody who's already certified. And I said,
Mhm.
and the problem is, did you read that in your contract, given you're an attorney? He said, yeah, I read it, and it didn't seem like a problem. I said, well, then why is it a problem now? And he said, well, I can't find anybody who knows what an ROI is, who's a coach. What? So what have you been hiring? And he said, well, to be honest, the people that I've been hiring have not really understood our needs. And I said, oh, okay. And is that the real reason why you went for this certification? And he said, yes. And I said, well, how many people have you interviewed? Maybe you haven't interviewed enough. And he said, 52 people that are certified by this
Wow.
organization. And I said, have you defined ROI for them? And he said, CB, don't you think they should know? And I said, yes, but I'm just trying to be helpful here. And he said, yeah. So, long story short, I ended the conversation. We were joking, and I said, okay, well, let me try to find somebody for you. And I said, after the conversation, why is this so difficult? If you're a corporate executive coach, meaning that you coach at the C-suite level, then how is it possible that you don't know what an ROI is? And how do you measure your success as a coach? And I further thought, I said, there needs to be an association that focuses on making sure that coaches can go toe to toe with their clients, and that includes knowing their language, their company, their competition, and about the employer or the C-suite person you're coaching. To me, that
Yes.
made sense coming out of corporate America myself. And thinking about the book Blue Ocean Strategy, I said, all right, let's go. Let's open an association with coaches who meet those qualifications. And that was the beginning.
That's a great story. That's a great story. And that's how you found your mission and the niche. Because typically, I mean, people would think, okay, I want to have this grandiose thing, or I want to create this particular product, or go into this particular service, and they come normally as a continuation of their professional world, right? They are in a company, they have some skill set, they have some thought leadership, and they want to continue on the momentum. And they started staying in their lane and progressing to become a consultant or open a company with a product that uses this type of skill set. For you, you came in from corporate America, and I understand you were in the marketing side, and then you dabbled a little bit with the idea of career coaching, and then you decided is not something that you are inspired to do, but you wanted to play a higher level at the C suite. You said, okay, well, let me play there. I want to branch out from being from the corporate side, being the marketing, and go into the coaching world, which I love. That's what you're saying. But I don't want to just be coach. I want to set up an organization that takes in like-minded people, coaches, but they speak the lingo of the corporate world, so they come from the corporate world. And this is how you created that blue ocean. And for our viewers and audience, this is actually a great book, originally published by INSEAD, I believe. And the landmark story of that book is the Circus du Soleil, the transformation of the circus for kids to the entertainment circus for the
Yes.
adults, because the industry was
Mm-hmm.
ailing. So they moved from a red ocean to a blue ocean, and that was the landmark case study. So you have gone from the red ocean of coaching organizations, amassing coaches from life coaches to fitness coaches to career coaching to any coaching to executive coaching, and you just created that elite boutique coaching, I would say, for
Yes.
executives. Well done, and this is a great mission, and it's very well articulated and clear. Now here comes the challenging
Okay,
question to you.
I'm ready.
You're coming from the marketing place, from corporate America. Who makes you credible and claiming authority in coaching, let alone setting up an organization for coaches? Why does members, the coaches that have a lot of books and publications and pedigree that they can fill a wall, listen and join you as a member? in your organization?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to shorten it for you. First of all, there are a lot of
Okay.
coaches and a lot of books written about coaching. But if you summarize them, they all say the same thing. And so I love being different.
Okay.
And so I like being different with honesty and truth and looking for where is that needle in the haystack that hasn't been addressed. Ergo, blue ocean strategy. But
Okay.
I couldn't just go from marketing into this field. So I started doing career coaching and I actually owned a franchise for career coaching. And I had a great
Hmm.
mentor. And in that, I realized there's a couple of things. One is I'm highly introverted. So drumming up business and being accountable was difficult. Two is I'm highly dyslexic. So correcting resumes was anti-culture to me. So I said, this is
Okay.
not going to work. If people are depending upon getting a job and there's a spelling mistake on a resume that I helped to create, we've got a problem, Houston. So I said, there's got to be a way I can use all of my background in the arts, which is where I started, in corporate America, in owning a catering business and being a career coach and having a franchise. I said, most people would look at that as being totally schizophrenic about what you want to do in life. But I looked at it in terms of what you say about reimagining you. And I said, what are the common traits and how are they linked together? And I realized I knew a
Hmm.
lot about a lot of things. I wasn't a master of those things, but I knew a lot. And I remember a mentor saying to me once when I was in corporate America, all you need to do to be successful is to be smarter than your clients in whatever you're doing.
Oh,
And I didn't quite
okay.
understand it at the time, but I suddenly realized it doesn't mean that you're working with clients that are not smart. It means the area that you're smart in, you are smarter than them. And
Okay.
so putting that all together, plus my experience as a person of color in corporate America, which was not positive. I was not allowed to have an executive coach. I wondered what they did. I wondered what it was that they did with this person that made them incredibly successful in the office. And so
Hmm.
I went about finding my own coach and paying for it myself. And it was quite expensive. But I began to see what I was not allowed to be exposed to. And I thought, this is a crime. Everybody should have this opportunity. And so when I left corporate America, I started working with attorneys who no longer wanted to be attorneys. So it was a crossover between coaching and counseling and coaching for careers to corporate executive coaching. And then I worked in the outplacement field, which gave me a breadth of both. And I was able to take courses and understand what executive coaching was, even though I was still not allowed to take the big courses and learn a lot about it. So I looked for opportunities where I could participate. Luckily, I was selected to be a coach for the pharmaceutical field, which was downsizing at the time. And what they needed was bereavement coaches. And I knew a lot about
Okay.
that area. And as I start to understand that coaching isn't just one, executive coaching isn't about one area. You need to know a lot about different things.
Hmm.
And putting that all together
Hmm.
was part of the thread, the yarn that I created, ACEC.
You have claimed authority and credibility through that journey of transformation as you started into the coaching world and then you got to experience coaching for this pharmaceutical company. You had a coach on your own, so you saw the effect. But you also had to lean on some of your traits or behaviors. And I think you have told me a couple pieces of advice that you were given that always speak your true north, be authentic. So tell me more about that. It was Barbara who told you that as an
Barbara Singer
advice?
Chang. She actually it's Barbara Singer now. Um, she's just an amazing executive coach, an amazing friend, and part of my personal board of directors, like you are. And I remember when I opened this, I was very upset because I'd come up with an idea and then the big guys would take it and run with it. And I said, Barbara, I can't
Mm,
take it. We can't do what they're doing because we don't have that kind of money. And she said, don't worry about it. Keep the course and stay to your true north, and it will happen. And people will begin to
mhm,
recognize where it came from. So just keep communicating, keep talking. Then what I had to learn was how to communicate to each person that I was talking to because
mhm.
communication can't be the same for everyone.
You're mentioning you had some difficulty in that communication space because of you, because of your race, your dyslexia, and some of this. I mean, this is a keynote that I would like to address, that no matter what your background is or what your, if you want, the traits or the lack of you would have, you will always have to adapt into communicating the right message to different people at different levels, right? So let's dive into a little bit on the
Yeah, I'd
communication
love
side.
to.
Tell me more about your challenges
I'd
on
love
that.
to. So, because I was raised as a military child, um, my dad believed in giving orders. That was it. There was no ands, ifs, or buts. And my mom was exactly the same, old school raising. And so when I started to
Mm,
talk to people, I started to talk to them like my parents talked to me. And that went over like a lead balloon.
mhm.
Plus, being
But you don't use that
no,
now,
but
huh? I mean, it's interesting to
I was
know.
also introverted, so I didn't quite know how to talk to people to tell them what was on my mind without them being offended.
Mm,
And even today, I slip. What I learned was that you had to figure out what's the best way to communicate to people in a way that was inclusive and not exclusive. And I have a personal board, as I mentioned before, who I would go to and say, what did I do wrong? Because I get feedback saying, she said this and she meant this, and I don't want to be part of it, and blah, blah, blah. And I would just sit there in tears because I didn't know what I did wrong. And so I started to write down responses and information I was getting, and then I would go over it with my board or somebody on the board. And they would say to me, well, CB, there's another way you could have said this that was more inclusive, much kinder, and bring people over to your side. And I started to study myself, literally study myself like I was studying for an exam. And I
okay.
began to hear it. It took a long time because I grew up with that voice. It took a long time for me to listen to other people and figure out, well, how come they said what they said and I said the same thing, but people are applauding them and they're not applauding me? There has to be something that I'm doing. And so I started listening to the tone. I started listening to the care that people were using in the way they said things. And I started to
Mm,
learn. I became my own student.
fantastic. Communication is a great skill. If you master it, you can move rocks and move stones and move mountains and make people do whatever you need them to do with simple way of communication, but being inclusive in your communication. I think that's
Yeah.
key.
And also, really
Um,
listening. I'm very fortunate. I'm a
mm,
graduate of the New School for Social Research. And there we learned to listen for what was not being said. That's a powerful tool.
and you practice that on me. I love
I didn't realize I was being that obvious.
it. So good. We talked about your mission and how you came with that mission. We talked about your uniqueness, being credible, being authentic, being claiming authority in that. We talked about your voice, which is the way you communicate, the way you listen, you communicate, being inclusive. This is absolutely great. And this is really a phase one of, for anybody who's listening in terms of viewers and audience, this is the first phase of building a brand, whether you're building your own personal brand, whether you have a startup and you're building a startup voice and mission and uniqueness and a positioning in this space. Moving on to the next level, now it's phase two is activation of that, right? It's how you're going to go and be visible in the world. You've done fantastic or phenomenal effect on being visible. You put ACEC on the map. You amassed great members with a lot of accolades, a lot of pedigree. I mean, you played really the at the high level, and I'm so fortunate to be part of the whole organization. 8 years now, and I don't think that back then when you started, we were too much on the digital front. Nowadays, with the attention economy, we can grab attention, we can advertise, we can go social, we can go on LinkedIn, we can put a lot of things digitally to make people aware and to put that organization and that brand digitally. But back then, we didn't have that. So how did you manage to attract such a pedigree of members that have joined you? Is it because it's you, CB? Is it because of your network? I'm puzzled actually. How did people know about ACEC and you, and how did people manage to join?
Well, it's actually an interesting story, and I didn't think about it until you just asked me this question. For the first 3 years or more, I played behind the scenes. Nobody knew who I was. And I did that on purpose. It's sad to say, but here in America, we still have a lot of discrimination. And so I thought if people knew I was a woman of color, they wouldn't come on board. So finally, a colleague of mine said, okay, CB, it's time. It's time for people to know who you were. And by that time, ACEC had grown and had credibility. The one of the strengths that I have is listening, as I said, to what's not being said and what is actually needed. And I think listening to people as I moved forward. I mean, we didn't have Zoom back then, so people didn't know who or what they were talking to, and my initials they don't know. And so all of that played to my strength, actually, until digital media got to the point where you were visible. And then I thought, okay, here we go. Let's just take a deep dive and take a deep breath and go for it. So it was a challenge to come out and play out in the open.
But yet you played. That's another courageous move
You know,
you took. Courageous and bold
Elie,
move, right?
when you grow up with certain financial limitations, you say to yourself, what do I have to lose here? Let's go for it. And what's needed to allow you to go for it? What do you need to reimagine you? What do you need to reimagine your life? What assets can you bring with you and build on? And those are important questions when you're looking at redesigning you as a person.
I like that. I might steal this for my next post.
You're welcome. Just give me some credit here.
I'm going to dive deeper into networking. For some reason, people go to you, one of them, and ask you, hey, CB, I need to meet this person, or I need to invite this person on my podcast, or I need a favor of this sort. Can you help? And what I get in less than 24 hours, 10 names or 5 emails are gone requesting that. And people listen and people do things for you because of you. So you have, what's the secret of networking? I mean, I'm dying to know. What's your secret of networking? I'm sure our viewers and audience, for those who do not know CB or do not have the engagement yet with CB, and I encourage you, please get introduced to CB, send her an email, introduce yourself, because she's a wonderful person and she's a networker. I think if you want to classify her as a leader, she's a networker. And the network is genuine. So people do things for CB because of CB. But she has a trick that she explained to me, and I want to listen from her on how she can do. She builds up a network, and how she does referrals to people.
I learned a long time ago that the best relationship you can build is based upon what you can do for the other person. And so I always
Okay.
start off a relationship trying to figure out, I love a jigsaw puzzle. How can I help this person? And is the person willing to give back? There was an old show here in America, and I cannot remember the name of it, where this guy would go around granting favors for people. And when they went to pay him, he said, "No payment, I'll call on you in the future for a favor." And that stuck in my mind. I truly believe in helping other people who will, here's the key, appreciate it. If I
Yes.
help
Yes.
somebody and they don't appreciate it, and I have my own measures in my head, and they're different for each person, then the relationship doesn't grow. And I think that people appreciate that I am first there to help them, and I will introduce them to people that I feel will help them as well as themselves. So they're not frivolous introductions. The other thing I learned is I have a colleague that when they introduce somebody, they just in the email, "This is such and such. I thought you would make a great conversation." There's nothing for the person to bite into. So I always try to say, "This is how I know them. This is where I think you'll be a good fit." Just something short so that the conversation has a place to jump off from.
I mean, what
I
you said
always
is
ask
that,
for feedback.
oh,
Sorry.
okay. Because that's in addition to what others have said, other
Yes.
guests
Yeah.
that, during the show, they've said that always when you introduce yourself to people on a social gathering and you have that first discussion, what goes on in your mind is, what is my benefit from that person? Is how can I help this person? How can I add value to that person? And that changes the context. And that's what you said, is that how can I help? How can I network with this person? How can I add value to that person? And hopefully they'll appreciate that, and they'll, eventually they'll give me back that favor, or you know, and even though you're not looking for an exchange, it's just an appreciation that's good enough. However, you do
That
something.
favor I'm looking for is not for me, it's for somebody else that I might introduce them to. That's an important piece. You want to connect
Okay.
with people that will automatically support you without your asking. And setting it up so that they're helping somebody that you know and vice versa, you can measure how forthcoming, how giving that person is. And always be
Yes.
ready to move the person to another list if you don't see that
Yes.
giving and taking and relationship developing. And in order to do that, you have to ask for feedback from both parties. So that, because sometimes, I'm not an expert in introducing people, and I could introduce you to somebody that's not helpful, and here are the reasons why. And so then when I'm going to introduce you to somebody else, I'll be mindful of what you needed that we didn't have a chance to talk about.
That's a good point that you mentioned, is that the feedback is important from various aspects. One aspect is, you are actually, when you refer somebody or you introduce somebody to another person from your network or from your circle, people, because they have such a trustful relationship with you, they understand that this is a genuine introduction, and then they do that favor. Now, if this person that you introduced, he actually goes and deceives you or behaves not normally and whatever, it's your trusted relationship that could be in jeopardy. I've been asked a lot during, in this region, can you introduce me to this? Can you facilitate this? And I don't normally do that unless really comes in from a trusted person that I know he will not abuse that trust and relationship. So that's important to ask for feedback to see how did it go, and if there is any value that was exchanged, at least you've done something good, you've helped others, and this is great. And I think that's the addition that was missing in
There's,
networking. So if we summarize a little,
I'm sorry,
yeah, go
but
ahead.
there's also something else that's really important. You have to be ready to fairly evaluate the person that you're introducing and vice versa. You have to look at, is this a person of their word? There's no perfect formula. I'm not perfect. I have been burnt, but you can't let that burning infest your willingness to help others and yourself. And it's hard. Sometimes it takes a while for you to get over the burn, but know that there is a better side someplace else. And I think this is particularly important for women. I was talking to a colleague the other day and who's absolutely brilliant. And she said, CB, I'm getting exhausted from people not being responsible for the positive side of a relationship. They take advantage of you. And she said, I'm just exhausted. And I said to her, but think of how many people appreciate. So don't stop now.
I'm going to move the discussion a little bit further. So now we talked about being visible. Early days, we didn't have social media, so you had to go to network, you had to leverage various ways of getting members attracted to ACEC, to the mission of ACEC. You were in the hideout mode because you were scared and you put the ACEC, but that's a strategy. It could work with anybody. It doesn't have to be of a woman in color. A lot of organizations they have today, even on social media or digital, they call them nameless accounts, right? You open a nameless account and you put the product or the brand at the front. It doesn't matter who's behind it, right? Because sometimes you want to play the brand, sometimes you want to play the person. That's a key message for anybody who's building a personal brand. If you're a person that has some thought leadership and you have come up with an idea or a product or a methodology, you can put that methodology in front. You don't have to sell or brand yourself. You can brand that methodology with all the benefits and make it the
Yeah,
personal
I
brand.
think, Ellie, we should,
And
take a step back and talk
yeah,
about what we mean by personal brand. As
yes,
you've said, and as you work with clients on building a personal brand, that doesn't mean a brand that discloses your entire life. It doesn't mean it's talking about the relationship with your significant other or your pet or anything like that. It is
yes,
professional personal branding, which is a big
yes.
difference. It is marketing your capabilities as a person versus as a group of people when you're with an organization.
Very well said. So if you look at CB Bowman, CB Bowman could be a brand, right? Because she would have a certain pillars of knowledge, of uniqueness, and that's what CB Bowman can work with and can put up and claim visibility and leadership on that, and that's her brand. We can also put courage as a brand powered by CB Bowman, and you can play that angle, and that's courage, and then with all the different methodologies, and you can claim that as a brand. You can have ACC as the brand, and that's what we have, which is a startup initially powered by CB Bowman. So if you look at this sphere of CB Bowman, you have CB Bowman as the nucleus, and you have courage, you have ACC, and soon you'll have other things these are children of the personal brand, but they're all powered by CB Bowman. If this is what I can summarize how a person can build his personal brand, and his children, being the parent, his children brands,
Yes.
if you want to say.
And at the same time, you want to be sure that there's some connecting root there so that you're not
Definitely.
going totally off the rail. So that when you explain to people what your mission is and why you're doing something, they could say, oh, that makes sense. Versus, what are you, crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. And today we're talking CB Bowman and ACEC. You see, so we're mixing that. We didn't touch on the courage branding that you have, or any other branding that you might have in the future. So, and this is a great explanation for people when they start, mind mapping what they want to do in the future. This is a great visual, if
Yeah,
you
and I
want to
think,
say, on how people
yeah,
could
and
map.
so for me, the connecting root is all about strategic courage. Strategic
Mm.
courage to open ACEC to help others in the field market themselves, learn more about what's going on. Then there is courage consulting, which is strategic courage to organizations. And then there's CB Bowman, that is that root that is connected to both of these. There is the author CB
Mm.
Bowman, right?
CB Bowman is not the superwoman. And I realized that when I joined ACEC, that you have uh,
Supporters.
what do we call it? No, not supporters, but you have that uh, power to get people to do things for you.
Oh,
Not in a forceful way, not in a forceful way, in a very nice way. And I call it delegation. Okay? So we are in meetings and we talk about ideas, things, and you jump in and said, this is a great idea. Who agrees, who doesn't agree? So we all agree. Why don't you try it out? Or why don't you help me doing that? Or can we have the committee address that? Or can we have the advisory board do that? So you are a master delegator, but people love it. But that's a good lesson for everybody who's starting out, because whoever is starting out, whether is in developing a product in a real startup fashion, or being in consulting or doing some service, they need people around them. They need